Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth. This is your host, Marc Bautis. Today I'm joined by guest Josh Lawler. Josh is the founder of the Film Shoot Rental Roadmap, how to rent your home tax-free for film shoots, photo shoots, and commercial productions. Before he cracked the code to film shoot rental success, Josh experimented with various real estate ventures, including live-in flips, single-family rentals, small multi-family rentals, build-to-rent new construction, and short-term vacation rentals. Film shoot rentals are by far his favorite real estate niche. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited to talk about, how someone can utilize their home for a film shoot. I think, we've all driven around town. You see the lights, you see all the activity, and, people get curious and they want to know what's being filmed. Are there celebrities there? But today's show, we're going to look at that from a different angle, how you can utilize your home to generate income from a film shoot. How'd you get into this space?
Thanks for that intro, Marc. So I think it's worth mentioning that, film shoot rentals were not my initial foray into real estate. So it's not like one day I decided, hey, I want to do something in real estate. Let me jump into film shoot rentals. Like you mentioned in the intro there, I've experimented in a number of different real estate niches, right? I think, and maybe worth just kind of talking through the real estate journey that led me to film shoot rentals, because I think, that allows a sort of a perspective that I think, many of your listeners who might also be investing in real estate will share as well. So, starting way back in 2014, my wife and I bought we bought the sort of an older house in 2009, kind of the ugliest house on the block, if you will, in a nice neighborhood, with the intention of doing a live-in flip. So we ended up, we lived in the space for a couple of years, but then did a total gut renovation, addition, created a lot of value, and ultimately sold that house and kind of moved locally into a new project house that ended up being a tear down rebuild, and that's kind of where we are now. Along the way, got into single family rentals, investing remotely. So I'm based in the Northeast, and but I like the markets in the Southeast better. So picked up some single family rentals in the Atlanta market and the Jacksonville, Florida market. I have property management in place. Just kind of went the turnkey investment route and picked those up in around 2016 timeframe. And so cash flow has been good, but more importantly, we've seen a lot of really, really good appreciation, obviously, over this time period. I bring this up because I've got some, experience with sort of traditional long-term rentals, right? And there's cash flow, but, it wasn't quite the cash flow that I was, kind of hoping for. You start out and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm getting, a few $100 a month in cash flow. I just need X number of houses and then I'll be there. Easier said than done. Coming back to when we rebuilt the current house that we're living in, we were kind of interested in exploring, opportunities, always looking for new opportunities within real estate. And, we found out about film shoot rentals. So we were talking to some people, read some articles about people who were doing this. And we thought, this sounds interesting. We just built a house. We thought, let's maybe test this out. And so I'll pause there for a second, but that's kind of the journey. I think it's important to note that, we didn't have any background, first of all, in the film industry, just had, what I would consider kind of traditional basic real estate investment experience in single family rentals. I didn't mention we have some small multifamily as well, like 1 to 4 unit rentals as well. So that's kind of how that was the journey leading up. So it was a number of years of traditional real estate investing before we got into film shoot rentals.
And since then, have you focused solely on film shoot, or has it kind of been, this is just like this little side way that we're utilizing and making income from it?
Yeah, so we continue to hold the long-term rentals in addition. And that's one of the things about film shoot rentals. I think there might be sort of people out there who sort of espouse one specific strategy over another and say, this is the strategy that you need to go all in on. I view film shoot rentals as really a complementary strategy. Whatever else you're doing, you can also do film shoot rentals, particularly renting out your own house. If we have time, we can also talk about some of the benefits for short-term rental investors and how they can use film shoot rentals in their short-term investments as kind of a complementary approach, which is quite interesting. But just from a renting out your primary home, there are a lot of advantages. And so, to answer your question, we continue to do both. So not focused exclusively on film shoot rentals, but the benefits of film shoot rentals can help accelerate other real estate investments or any other investments that you're interested in for that matter.
Can you take me through the process of kind of start to finish to like how do you as the homeowner find an opportunity, or does the film find you? And then what does that look like going forward?
Yeah, no, happy to talk you through it. And I think it's also worth at this point to maybe just touching on some of the myths, right? When we hear film shoot rentals and what we're really talking about. When most people hear film shoot rentals, the first thing they think of is feature films. Okay. So, the approach that I teach and the strategy that we follow, we're not shooting feature films in our house. So I think that's important to get out of the way. If we're not shooting feature films, so what sort of shoots are we doing? For the most part, we are doing short-term, i.e., 1 day, possibly 2 day, commercial shoots, photo shoots, video shoots. And, who are the people doing this if it's not feature films? Well, every business across the country has some sort of a website. They've got social media presence. And they need to keep that content current, keep it fresh. And so most of our shoots are companies ranging from small startups launching a new website to well-established firms, launching a new product, and anything in between, really. That's important to kind of just state and explain first. So you asked the question, how do you find it? My recommendation and the approach we followed is just like there's Airbnb for short-term rentals, there are specific platforms out there that you can use to list your home. There are any number of platforms, and the numbers have been growing in recent years, but there are a few things that you want to look for in a platform. First of all, location. You want a platform that's going to cover your location. Not all platforms cover everything. Some are very specific in terms of specific geographies. Plenty of free sites as well. And I've tried the pay sites, but in my experience, the sites that are free to list are just as good. And actually, I recommend them because we tend to get more business through those free sites. I think you also want to look for sites that have pricing transparency. What do I mean by that? So, you want to be able to set your rate transparently so that you're not wasting your time. I've tried sites where you don't really have that option. You get a lot of inquiries, you're on the phone, you're exchanging emails, and it's only after 20 minutes into a phone call where you learn that the budget is, well below what so pricing transparency is important. I think you also want to look for a platform that, if possible, allows what I call tiered pricing. Shoots come in all different sizes. We've done one-person shoots all the way up to about 45-person shoots. So there's a pretty big range. And as you can imagine, the level of disruption varies. For the most part, it's a pretty straight line relationship between number of people. Not always, but usually it's a pretty straight line relationship between the number of people and the level of disruption in a shoot. I'm not talking about problematic disruption, but just disruption in terms of number of people moving around in the house and props and equipment and things like that. So you want to charge more for a larger shoot. And not all the platforms allow you to do that. Some of them do, some of them don't. You also want to look for, is there insurance through the sites? So, any property damage, the site will cover your insurance. Finally, what sort of fees do the platform take, right? What percentage of the fees? Usually there's some sort of split between the person hosting the location and the person renting the location, similar to what you'd see in a short-term rental bot like an Airbnb. First step, you want to take photos, professional photos. You want to list your home. And if you've ever done a rental on Airbnb, you kind of get a sense of the typical, there's a description, what amenities are listed, what sort of house rules, any restrictions, etc. So that's really my recommendation, to work through the listing platforms as opposed to, say, a location scout. So another channel into this is working with location scouts. Location scouts have clients for whom they're working, and they're sourcing locations. They're looking for locations for shoots. And in my experience, we've had less success with location scouts and sort of taken up more time in terms of visits and phone calls and emails versus people who find us directly on a listing platform, and they're usually much quicker to make a decision and move forward with less back and forth.
Is it like, I guess, like basically everything else in real estate, location matters? So are there some locations in the country where you're more likely to get hits on your listing than other places?
Great question. I'm glad you brought this up. And so I think this sort of speaks to another myth that, kind of I hear a lot about. And, the common belief is, well, I don't live near LA, so this isn't going to work for me. But if you think about it, businesses across and companies across the country, and even internationally for that matter, need to create content for their websites, for their marketing campaigns, for their social media. And businesses are located all across the country. What I've found is that it's really about the convenience of where does the decision maker live, the person who is paying for this marketing, paying for this production to happen, because they often want to come to watch. And so, to answer your question, no, I don't think location is a big driver. Location will determine maybe which shoots kind of are interested in your place, but this isn't like a movie shoot that says, okay, we have to shoot in New York City because the movie is based in New York City. And if you go on the some of the popular platforms as well, you'll see locations listed all across the country, from large cities, small rural areas, every state, and like I said, even internationally as well. So a lot of the times it really comes down to just either where is the company, and then the other angle is where is the production crew based? Because sometimes we've had it both ways. We've had instances where the owner of a company was based within an hour drive from where we're located, but they were working with a crew and the entire crew flew out from a different part of the country, and vice versa. We've had experiences where we once did a shoot for a company that was based in the Pacific Northwest. And so, the owner of the company flew across the country to us for the shoot, but he was working with a local production company. It's really a kind of a logistical convenience of either where the company is or where the crew is based.
You mentioned disruption. I guess that could mean various things, but you also mentioned that these are usually short-term shoots, where it's maybe 1 day, 2 days, so the level of disruption is kind of contained. But is it the disruption like, all right, I'm going to leave for work at 8 o'clock, I'm going to come back at 5 and it's all going to be done and I'm going to go on my way? Or if it's a 2 day one, do I have to go find a hotel for 2 days and then hope that they're done in 2 days?
It's a great question. So I think the first point I'll make is, as I mentioned, yes, the vast majority of our shoots are 1 day shoots. The typical, what I'll call a professional shoot, because we have had in the early days, unprofessional shoots, and we can certainly get into that. But the professional shoot is typically a full day shoot. Could be a 10 to 12 hour shoot. Typically, I would say 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or even 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the longest. In terms of disruption, first of all, I would recommend that someone remains in the house. And that's actually one of the benefits, right? Like, so unlike an Airbnb where you're vacating the property if you're renting it out, first of all, you can stay in the house during the shoot. And I actually recommend that someone stay in the house just to answer any questions that come along. So this is great for people if you are, a remote worker. You can easily be working in your home office and a shoot can be going on in another room. Level of disruption that we're talking about, I would say that the busiest time of the shoot is the load-in period. So the morning, there's just a lot of in and out, loading in equipment, loading in any props, et cetera, that are being used in the shoot. And then at the end of the day, load out when people are kind of leaving the house as well. But once the shoot gets underway, if you've got a professional producer, professional director, they typically run quite smoothly. And I mentioned before that relationship between number of people and disruption. Sometimes, paradoxically, I even find like the larger shoots are just really well run because they have to be. Everything is planned out, the whole schedule for the day to, okay, where are the people who aren't actively involved going to sort of hang out while they're waiting? Where are they going to eat lunch, et cetera? Level of disruption is certainly manageable. And I'll just touch on your second part of your question in terms of, a 2 day or multi-day shoot. We do multi-day shoots occasionally. Most of the time it's a 2 day shoot. The longest shoot we ever did was 5 days. On that shoot, we actually did get a hotel room only because there was a lot of equipment. Some 2-day shoots, we haven't gotten a hotel room because there just hasn't been that much equipment, or the crew has put things away at the end of day one and then come back on day two as if they're sort of setting up for a new shoot again. The economics of it works. So it's obviously a personal decision if you are going to leave your house during a multi-day shoot, which again, in my experience, are less common. But, again, if you're making thousands of dollars in a day per day for a shoot, it's worth spending a couple $100 for a hotel room.
You mentioned insurance, and some of these listing sites actually provide some type of insurance. Do people, in addition to that, have to get some rider or some different type of insurance on their house to do this?
My recommendation is you want to make sure that the crews have insurance to cover any kind of issue. One of the things that people need to think about too is local regulations. And I bring this up. So for example, our town and most towns have some sort of film permitting process. So, and this is really just to, make sure that, everything is above board and safe. So, no explosions are setting off, right? And that disruption to the neighborhood and the community will be minimal as well. As part of the permitting process, typically the town will require evidence that the production company has sufficient insurance. So typically, you'll sort of see insurance through that for issues. And like I said, the sites also have varying levels of property damage insurance as well. It's worth touching on that because I think this is something that people worry about, like, hey, what happens if there's a problem in my house? So look, I'll say, first of all, we've never experienced any kind of, major damage. Probably the worst that we've experienced is just little scuffs and dings on the walls here and there for a crew that's, maybe not as careful moving equipment. Most scuffs from equipment rubbing against the wall come right off with a magic eraser. Other times a little bit of paint touch up to touch up a scratch on the wall. So I would say certainly nothing major that we found. And, the other thing I'll mention too is that, again, most of the professional crews, and this is always part of my screening process, I always ask to say, okay, what kind of floor and wall protection are you going to bring in? And most professional crews are used to that, and they'll have, a couple people on crew whose sole job it is to lay down the floor protection, put up any wall protection in stairwells, for example, that kind of thing. So there are ways to certainly mitigate the risk of any damages and any wear and tear. But, obviously we're still doing this, and, it hasn't really been an issue for us.
You mentioned like a screening process. Do you ever turn down a shoot just for whatever reason?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the screening process that we have, it's sort of a set of, and I share this in the course that I teach as well, and it's evolved over time, and I've learned kind of the hard way, right? At the early days, we were just sort of excited to have people come in and interest, but over time I've learned to screen in such a way, really just to make sure it's a professional shoot. And there are ways to do this by setting certain constraints as well. Initially, we didn't have any kind of minimum number of hours. So I think by setting a minimum number of hours, you're going to lose out on some business, right? There are a lot of people out there, early on in our film shoot rental journey, we had a lot of people, saying, hey, I just need your place for an hour and a half. And pro tip for everyone listening, it usually takes at least an hour to set up and at least another hour to clean up. So anyone who's asking for an hour and a half, red flag, and I would stay away. So simply by setting that minimum number of hours, you're going to screen out a lot of problematic tenants. I think also, you want to avoid underpricing your location. You may think like, oh, I don't want to charge too much, or that's, but by charging, kind of a solid, well, I'll call it sort of market rates. And, we can talk about sort of how do you set your rate, because our rate is certainly, we initially set our rate too low and we're inundated with inquiries when we first started. Just like other, anyone who invests in real estate, you'll find, the level of quality of tenant will typically go up with sort of higher rents and sort of, low rents. The quality of tenant that you're going to get is not great. So just by setting those constraints of minimum hours, ensuring you're priced appropriately, are going to screen out a lot of problematic tenants. I'd say another red flag is someone who doesn't want to go through the town permitting process. Again, you want to be above board. Professional crews are used to dealing with municipalities, used to dealing with towns. They no problem filling out the film permit application and whatever the local town permit fee is that they're going to be covering. So anyone who kind of balks at that is a red flag for me. I'll also say, in terms of screening, you don't have to rent out your entire house. So it's really up to you in terms of which rooms you're interested in renting. And so, if someone comes and says, oh, I want to sort of use this room that's, we have a couple off-limit spaces in our house. So my, older daughter's bedroom is one, and my home office is another room. So if someone wants to rent or use spaces that are off-limits, sort of turn down, politely decline those shoots. And I think, other shoots that want to shoot sort of outside of our town rules. So our town, for example, has certain hours during the week that they allow shooting. If a shoot wants to shoot outside of that, I typically politely decline that as well. So those are some of the sort of aspects of screening that help us decide sort of who to accept and who not to accept.
You mentioned like off limits and some spaces off limits. Do you see people actually even taking it a step further and using like a short-term rental or an Airbnb, as what they're offering for this? So that way they don't even have to worry, like everything's on, and you can use all spaces of the house.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, a lot of short-term rental investors aren't really aware of this. Film shoot rentals can be a real good complement for short-term rental investors. And if you think about it, one of the reasons why this is complementary is your typical short-term rental or vacation rental, you're getting weekend bookings, right? People are going away for the weekend or maybe a long weekend. Most shoots take place during the week. So it's really a way to complement and kind of, add value to an existing asset that you have if you are a short-term rental investor. And I'll also add, we haven't really talked about this yet, but interestingly, the economics of film shoot rentals, I think, are even more advantageous than short-term rentals in a way. If you think about the spectrum of real estate, typically the longer term the lease, the lower the overall rent. We know that a nightly rate on an Airbnb, even at a respectable occupancy rate, is going to yield more profit than the same property on a traditional 12-month lease. Film shoot rentals takes that even further because the rates that you're setting are hourly rates. And again, this is another reason why we set a sort of a minimum number of hours per day to make it worth our while. The short-term rental investor who might be charging $300 a night could probably charge $300 an hour for a film shoot rental. We haven't even talked about the tax benefits, but for a primary residence, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with the Augusta rule. For those that aren't, not a tax professional, but roughly speaking, you can rent your property for up to 14 days without paying taxes, right? Kind of a leftover from the Augusta, the Masters Golf Tournament in Augusta, Georgia, and the local residents wanted to rent out their homes during the tournament for a couple weeks and lobbied Congress to sort of create this law, which is now applies to everyone. My wife and I have kind of landed on, we limit our rental days to no more than 14 days a year. And we do that by kind of calibrating our pricing in terms of adjusting the demand so that all of our film shoot rental income on our primary residence is tax-free for the year because we don't exceed 14 days. Obviously, as a short-term rental investor, you're going to be renting for, in excess of 14 days, but it's still, I think, a nice complement that all short-term rental investors should consider. They already have the pictures, they've already got the setup, and yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for short-term rental investors.
What's the most you've ever made from a shoot, or that you've heard of someone making from a shoot?
Yeah, so I'll share my personal experiences. So the most we ever made from a one-day shoot was just over $11,000. Huh. That was, again, the most. Our typical shoot is closer to the $6,000-$7,000 range for a day. But that shoot the reason that was a little more is because, first of all, it was a larger shoot. We talked about the tiered pricing. So our hourly rate was higher based on the number of people. So that was kind of about a 45-person shoot. And then they needed overtime as well. And so overtime, you can charge time and a half. Overtime is not something to worry about. It can be advantageous, and I think it's worth just sort of building into your schedule so you're not scheduling something immediately to start or you have to be somewhere immediately at the end of a shoot. In this case, the renters simply just a few hours before the end time, they said, hey, Josh, looks like we're going to need some more time. Is that okay? We agreed, and it was very seamless. So yeah, that was a little over 11,000. And remember, because we kept our annual number of shoots to within 14 days, that's like the pre-tax equivalent of closer to 15,000. You can start to do the math here, and for people who are looking to get into real estate, a few of the things that often hold people back are the down payment, right? Coming up with the capital to invest. you already have the asset, your home. You don't need to save for a down payment. And you can start right away. There's no lengthy underwriting process that you have to go through. And so, yeah, and it's a very low risk and flexible, right? So you determine if you only want to do shoots on, Thursdays and Fridays, that's what you set up on your listing. This is when it's available. If you only want to allow shoots on the first floor of your house and all the second floors off limit, that's fine too. A lot of flexibility, low risk, and high potential for profit. And even, if you sort of limit the number of days to 14, even tax-free profit as well. And, obviously you can do whatever you want with this money, but if you're interested in other real estate strategies, this is a way to, I think, accelerate, that real estate investment journey and strategy that you might have for other areas as well.
Does the company or person that's doing the shoot, what's their screening process look like? Do they just book it off of your pictures and kind of a conversation, or do they actually come and scope out the place before they decide, yes, this is one fits?
It depends. So we've had some production companies that make decisions very quickly. They see the pictures, quick phone conversation, maybe they have one or two questions, and they book it, and that's it. Other, I would say, more traditional production companies like to do what's called a scouting visit. A small number of people from the crew, typically maybe the producer, the director, one or two other people, come to your house for half an hour or maybe an hour max, look around, make sure the pictures are as the real space looks like the pictures, check out the lighting, maybe use it to plan some scenes, and then that helps them to make the decision as well. But the listing platforms, similar to many platforms that are out there, have reviews and ratings. So they can obviously look at they can read reviews from other people who have rented from you as a way to check. They can kind of talk, they can go back and forth on questions. It really varies from sort of quick decisions to more extensive, let's have a longer conversation with a lot of questions, depending on the personalities of the people involved, I would say.
For pricing, do you see something like comps, or do you kind of just look at, okay, I could rent this, I'm in this part of the country, I could rent it for this, and we're going to do this multiple?
Yeah, so I definitely cover pricing strategies in the course, and this is something that we've our thinking on this has evolved over time. So when we first started, we had no idea what to price at, and we definitely underpriced. And as I mentioned, that was evident by the fact that we were just within hours of posting our first listing, we were inundated with inquiries from people asking too. So okay, maybe we need to adjust this. Just at a high level, without getting into all the details, what you want to do is you really want to look at other locations in your area, see what they're pricing, look for homes that sort of appear to be comparable. And that provides a good sort of first estimate of sort of the range of where you should be. You can certainly experiment a little bit. I've found that as long as you're within the range and not, some outlier, the budget is less of a concern. It's more about the look of the house, the requirements. And, it's actually worth touching on too. Another sort of common myth that people often think when they think film shoot rentals is that, I have to have some, amazing house. It's got to be perfect in every way. Every shoot has unique requirements. So talk about sort of the right pricing. It really comes down to more about, does the location have the look that the project is going for or not? And then so long as you're priced appropriately within that, it typically works.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. But we're just about out of time. I want to thank you for joining me today. You gave some great info on what potentially could be a new real estate investing niche for our listeners. How best can someone find more about the course that you teach, and how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is filmshootrentals.com. That's the site. You can learn more about the course. You can contact infos there. You can reach me at josh@filmshootrentals.com. And yeah, this is great. Thanks.
Great. We'll include all that in the show notes. Thanks again, Josh, and thank you everyone who tuned in today. Don't forget to follow the Agent of Wealth on the platform you listen from and leave us a review of the show. We're currently accepting new clients, and if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one consultation with our advisors, please do so at bautisfinancial.com/call.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.